who is the president Astif Amity University, and to kindly share their views. And I would also request the other panelist, Dr. S.K. Rajput, his director, Amity Institute of Indian System of Medicine, Dr. Jitendra Sena, his assistant professor of Amity Institute of Molecular Medicine and Stem Cell Research, Mr. Badoni, to kindly facilitate the question answer round after this session. So over to Dr. W. Sulamurthy, sir.
Professor Akshay Anand, I can't see him.
I'm there.
Okay, thank you so much. We are delighted to have viewers, a very distinguished neuroscientist of our country, whom I have known for almost more than 2 decades. Outstanding neuroscientist, neurologist, and who is an experimental neurologist, whom I rate very high at the global level, and very talented Professor Akshay Anand. He is Professor of Neuroscience at Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research, PGI Chandigarh, which is a very well known institute globally as a medical hospital and medical research institution. And I welcome viewers. You are going to have a very, very intellectually enriching experience. So on behalf of Founder President Dr. Ashoki Chauhan and the Chancellor Dr. Atul Chauhan and all members of the Amity fraternity, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you for this very important webinar on yoga research, relevance to COVID pandemic. And yoga is very close to our heart, all the people who are now attending this webinar, because yoga is a very ancient wisdom and Indian way of life, which has really promoted positive health over centuries. And more than 5,000 years ago, the yoga started in our country. And if we have given to the world something unique for health, it's yoga. And it's globally practiced everywhere across the globe. And my salutations to Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, that he has taken yoga globally now to through the United Nations the organizations. Now today, International Day of Yoga is being celebrated across the globe on 21st June. And this is a great achievement for our country that we are able to give something globally for promoting a positive health. So, and also the Moraji Desai National Institute of Yoga, headed by Dr. Basavareddy, who has also spearheaded Prime Minister's mission to take yoga globally. He makes a lot of efforts. Common yoga protocol has been formulated. Yoga certification board has been constituted and functionalized. And so a lot of activities now are happening in the field of yoga. So we in Amity, we are also celebrating every year. Last 3-4 years, we have been celebrating International Day of Yoga on 21st June across all our campuses. We have 11 universities in India, about 20 campuses abroad, and about 25 schools. Everywhere, yoga is being practiced, not only on the day of International Day of Yoga, but also we are propagating the message of yoga across the Amity universe. And we, Founder President Dr. Chauhan has established Amity Institute of Indian Systems of Medicine, which includes yoga, naturopathy, Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, and also homeopathy. So we have established and we have started a BSc Honors in Yoga, and the number of students have been registered. And also we have conducted open elective on yoga, and a large number of people have taken that. And now we have established recently, about a month ago, by Honorable Minister of Ayush, Shri Shripad Naik ji has inaugurated Amity Ayurveda Center in our New York campus. We have Amity, New York, Long Island, about 170 acres. It's a huge complex which we have, and we have started yoga right during the last year itself. We have started, and this year we are doing it in a big way, since we have established in US a very big center in Amity, New York, which is in the Long Islands. And we have also established a herbal garden in Amity University, Haryana, and where we have more than 15,000 species of herbal, the medicinal plants are planted there, and we are giving the seedlings, we are training the farmers, give them seeds. So we are propagating also the herbal medicine and Ayurveda in a big way. So this is a fortnight which Dr. Rajput, who is the director of Amity Institute of Indian Systems of Medicine, and Dr. Swati Madan, who is the assistant director with him, and so with his whole team, Sachendra as well as J.K. Srivastava, all these people are now propagating this message of yoga across the globe. And we have a big mission, not only just propagating, but a concerted effort to put this science of yoga on a scientific pedestal. It is just not only a philosophy, it's a way of life, and it is also a science. So we have also done a lot of research on the prophylactic, promotive, and curative potentials of yoga. And now we are trying to further extend that work in Amity University. And we are having a very distinguished Professor Akshay Anand, and I have known him since my DRDO times, and he has achieved a lot. He's going to be introduced formally by Swati Madan, but I know him that he has worked on cell survival mechanisms using animal model and the mind-body complex through yoga, and he has done some outstanding work in high altitude as well. And he submitted a big program in the Life Sciences Research Board of DRDO at that time. And he works in many fields. And being a neurophysiologist myself, so I have great admiration for this great neuroscientist. So without much ado, we welcome you, Professor Akshay Anand, and all the viewers. I can tell you, you are in for an intellectually enriching interaction for the next 1.5 hours. So with this, I hand it over back to Dr. Swati Matan and
Yes.
Dr. Rajput to conduct the proceedings.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, sir, for your kind words and sharing your views. Now, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Akshay Anand. He's professor at Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research, Chandigarh, with strong interest in understanding cell survival mechanism using cell culture, animal models, and mindfulness-based yoga approaches. He serves as a resource person in more than 30 countries. His discoveries has been published in Nature Medicine, JAD, IOVS, and scientific reports. He is also a QCI level yoga instructor and has completed 2 dozen research grants and guided 14 PhD theses and spearheaded several academic social activities, including the ongoing continuous lockdown yoga education series, bringing interdisciplinary experts under one platform. He was the key coordinator in operationalizing the Ministry of Ayush funded NMB program as Vice Chairman of India Yoga Association, Chandigarh. And moreover, Dr. Anand was nominated for the prestigious Padma Award 2020, besides being honored by UT Police for exemplary work in the advancement of yoga research. Sir is the editor-in-chief in Annals of Neurosciences, editor-in-chief in Integrative Medicine Case Report, JIMCR. Sir, we are very thankful. We are very thankful for sparing your valuable time with us, and it's a proud moment that you are here with us. So we welcome you here and kindly initiate the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Selvamurthy. Thank you, the Amity University, Dr. Swati Madan, for a very generous introduction. I'm supposed to be practicing yoga and have to be very humble. All these nice words are of no meaning unless we are able to take our research, our thoughts into action for society, whether it's for the paramilitary forces, military forces, or the high altitude related problems to which Dr. Selvamurthy alluded to. I was also thinking that when he said he knows me for 20 years, he's 71 now, so I'm approaching 50. So the people I'm meeting today, I would be seeing them 20 years hence and probably sitting at his seat if I continue to stay healthy. So as you mentioned, our lab's focus developed towards cell survival mechanisms when I returned back from University of Kentucky in USA and set up this neuroscience research lab. And we were looking at the cell survival mechanisms from the cell culture models, bringing disease to models and rescuing them, and also then mimicking the disease phenotypes, primarily neurodegenerative disorders such as memory loss or AMD, macular degeneration, and then rescuing them with herbs, with stem cell, different types of stem cell, different routes of administration, and seeing using standard molecular tools if we could rescue it and how well we could rescue it and what were the mechanisms that were involved. And then we had a very active stem cell manipulation program in our lab, and obviously driven by our graduate students who are doing PhD, some postdoctoral fellows, and the entire presentation and the talk that I'm going to give is, I must acknowledge the liberal funding of DST, DBT, ICMR, DAE, CSIR, and almost all the funding agencies which have continued to fund the lab in order to remain in the self-sustaining mode of operation and execution. So three routes that we use towards understanding the cell survival, whether by creating injury in the animal model or in the cell culture systems or by manipulating stem cells, wanted to answer the same question: if we can enhance the cell survival, if we could rescue the injuries in heart, in brain, in eyes, primarily brain, and the CNS disorders was my love and my passion. So we created all these models. But then suddenly in November 2018, although I had very active interest in bringing the Indian system, which your department is currently come up with and is doing the seminar, we had worked with Brahmi Becopomoniera in rescuing the artificially induced memory loss in mouse model of memory loss. But in 2018, when I was in Kenya, there was a meeting, an Alzheimer's disease vascular group headed by Raj Kalaria, and we heard about the failure of one of the Pfizer's anti-Alzheimer drug. The announcement came that $2 billion went down the drain, and this was the 200th failure for the anti-Alzheimer drug. And similar things happened, one after the other. We didn't have any big discovery or a molecule which could, rescue or address the neurological disorder, whether it is stroke, it is multiple sclerosis, any of the neurogenetic disorders, or the Alzheimer's disease itself, or even the ALS. Or you talk about the dementias, I'm not even mentioning them. So it led me and many of my scientists in the group to think where to go, what to do. And with developing countries such as India, the costs of healthcare were escalating, population was escalating. I started moving slowly towards more and more towards our ancient techniques such as yoga and Ayurveda. And I was also inspired by our success with Brahmi, which we used in a dose-dependent fashion in the mouse model of a drug-induced artificial amnesia in the mouse. And we could, rescue it in a dose-dependent fashion. We published about 10 to 12 papers. So there was hope that there is something there hidden in not just a single molecule approach, but probably a synergistic approach provided by herbs and other things. And there were parallel discoveries we made in our neighboring country, China. Artemisinin came up, anti-malarial drug, what is called as the redwood, came out to be an anti-malarial drug and even went on to win a Nobel Prize. So I tried moving forward using the same tools of animal, the cell culture and the biomarker discovery and the stem cell manipulation programs by rethinking, rewiring, and trying to answer the same question of cell survival. So my entire inspiration came from the NCDs, or the non-communicable disorders, which I just listed a few of them, and an inability to treat them by any of the means that I just mentioned: drug approach, stem cell approach, or any of the the traditional modern approaches, so to say. There was failed clinical trials one after the other, and that was the time when I began to get into yoga more actively. I myself underwent the training and voluntary, as Dr. Selvamurthy mentioned about the accreditation programs. The accreditation program of yoga began to happen, and the QCI launched the level 1, level 2, level 3 programs. So I took one of those voluntary programs, went through the tests and cleared them in the process, even though I was a practitioner, but I got formally introduced to Patanjali Sutras, the Gharenj Samhitas, and all that. And I was acutely aware of a very big program happening down south close to Bangalore by one of the world's biggest yoga university called the SVyasa. And they were launching what was mentioned by Swati as the NMB program, or the Niyantrit Madhumeh Bharat program, or a controlled diabetic India program, if I were to translate that. And that program was being launched and they were identifying coordinators. So I volunteered to be the North India coordinator, and the program was beautiful program of an intervention of yoga protocol, which was developed by a Delphi protocol, bringing all yoga gurus, the experts together, and what was called the DYP, the Diabetic Yoga Protocol, which is a little different from common yoga protocol, which is practiced on IDY, International Day of Yoga, which is only for 45 minutes. This particular program had more of dynamic exercises of the asanas, postures, and a significant amount of stomach massage, Vakrasan, and Mandukasan incorporated, and a bit of meditation also, because it pretty much encompasses the Ashtang Yoga aspect of the Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. So it pretty much encapsulates everything. And the idea was to look at what is happening 3 months down the line when we screen the pre-diabetics, led by Dr. H.R. Nagendra and Dr. Nagaratna. The plan was rolled out to screen these pre-diabetics in the villages, in the cities, by what is called the Indian Diabetic Risk Score, just a questionnaire-based screening format, and we could, after screening 250,000 people across the country, come down to 50,000 pre-diabetics, basically defined by an HbA1c between less than 6.4, 5.7 to 6.4. The traditional criteria, even though it keeps changing, the definitions keep changing. At that time, that was a golden diagnostic criteria, and we took about 50,000 of them, and then they were given this with informed consents and ethical approvals. We gave them diabetic yoga protocol by engaging, whom, not the scientists, but the yoga practitioners themselves, who went, when they went home, door-to-door screening, they were the ones who took assisted in getting on the labs to collect blood, and then administered the yoga protocol for 3 months, from February to May. And these people,
are you making any presentation PPT?
I thought, I was thinking that if I'm not making a PowerPoint, I thought that the webinar, it's my assumption that it's more interactive, face-to-face.
Sure. Go ahead.
Used to see
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. So the 3 month program was, and why I'm bringing my presentation, why am I kickstarting my presentation by the diabetic yoga protocol? I can hint that we have a higher association of the diabetics developing COVID, and we'll come to that very soon. But let me try to tell you what happened after 3 months of diabetic yoga protocol intervention. We looked at the profile, biochemical profile, HbA1c, cholesterol, stress, and we also looked at the prevalence of yoga, how many people practice yoga, and if there were any barriers, and we did those 12, 13 papers are already out. So we actually found that there was a reduction in the conversion of the pre-diabetics to diabetics 3 months down the line as compared to the control group. So the control villages, the control parts of the city. So every city had one control, one wait list, one test, one wait list. Similar was the situation for villages. So all the 63 districts, all with the twin control and test, control and test, and all that data put together. About 9,000 people practiced DYP, developed a yoga protocol, for 3 months. And this was the result, that the conversion into diabetes actually reduced. And this is now almost accepted in BMJ and the other papers showing that stress was more in the pre-diabetic as compared to the diabetics. Came out as another paper in General Hospital Psychiatry, that the HbA1c reduced over the age. We did that. We were able to have a handle on how much were the pre-diabetics, how many were the young diabetics, and all that data became different kinds of papers, which refreshed India's knowledge of the epidemiology, the intervention, and the methodological tools, how to put quality assurance into such a big scale, and then publishing them as a team, working as a team in such a big 1,200 volunteers spread across the country. So this told us a very important thing, that in India, we have diabetes and we are becoming a capital soon, as you all know, but the young diabetics are actually slowly becoming bigger. And we do not have the data, but my assumption is we probably are already the capital of young diabetics. And it is so important and so alarming, because now we have COVID staring at us. It's an untreatable disorders. And as I mentioned in the beginning, my passion was the non-communicable disorders, because I was not so much fascinated by public health problems. I thought there would be an antidote, there would be an antibiotic, there would be an antiviral. So I wanted to know why diabetes become a diabetic, why Alzheimer's disease happens. So what at the cellular level, what are the changes happening? And I used to love to play with the animals. trying to understand for the sake of curiosity. And of course, being in a medical institute, I was reminded by my clinical colleagues that there has to be a translation. But then suddenly the COVID scourge came, and there was a shift from the NCDs to the communicable disorder, which I never imagined would be such an havoc. And yoga would become such an important tool was even less thought of by me. But so the young diabetics was a big number, and we have our reports now telling a significant amount of reports coming from China. And as the epidemic progressed from one country to the other, you can note that the research is also following the trends as they go from one country to the other. And if you look at those papers, you can also see that the traditional systems of those countries are also chasing those countries as the allopathic or the modern medicine drugs, the clinical trial interventions, whether they're HCQ, just reporting the prevalence, just reporting the comorbidities, go from China to Iran to Italy. The papers also move from China to Iran to Italy, and the papers from the traditional medicine also correspondingly move in that fashion. And so young diabetics, the diabetes was found to be associated with the COVID pandemic. The hypertensives were found to be having an equal association. The old age was a vulnerable group, and we had comorbidities also having an equally vulnerable for the COVID. So what do? We are so concerned that the young diabetics may actually follow through, and not only the old, who knows that the young diabetics, if not given a good regime of intervention, such as physical exercise, which is almost out of question in the lockdown and a slow unlock one phase, that probably something in-house like yoga might work. And especially with regard to DYP, our diabetic yoga protocol results in reduction of the pre-diabetes to diabetes. We might as well, consider instituting this public health strategy, the DYP intervention for the risk reduction for at least the young diabetes, as well as the other diabetes which have gone out of control, as well as for the adults and the elderly. So SVS very recently came out with 3 yoga protocols, COVID yoga protocols, one for the kids, other for the adults, and the third for the elderly. And they are pretty much lung-based, pranayam-based exercises. There are asanas, there are meditation component, and they are being tested. And our review has just come out in iJoy, and the other papers are also coming out. It has affected the work. It has affected work from home. It has affected the stress levels of people, not only who are locked down, but people who are treating them as healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, physicians, the police workers, and all those people who are exposed to the susceptible population. So these are the people who have stress, and it would not be a good idea that we start giving them anti-stress drugs or giving them alcohol to reduce their problem of stress. And we also know from our own prior knowledge that the stress has a direct crosstalk, or it can crosstalk with the immune system. So there is a CNS immune system crosstalk, which is known as HPA axis and HPG axis. And if there is a compromised internal stress factor, it may further exacerbate our immune system further. So that needs to be taken care of. And this is where our ancient technique, such as yoga, comes to fore. And I would try to now, having spent 10 minutes in giving a background of a research lab, of how as a person, as a scientist, I graduated from a core molecular biologist to an application of molecular biology into yoga, to next 10 minutes in telling you the when, how, what, and who's who in yoga. Before I really go down to the direct link of what we can do, what we know from our yoga research studies, which could be relevant to COVID, and how we can do it. So let's go down, when should we do it? Should we determine a research project on the need? I think it is a public health problem. I think the need is very, very important. Of course, the need is sometimes defined by scientists as a curiosity to know something. But here, I think curiosity has to be taken over by a public good. We have a problem, and I think it's a gloomy scenario, and this is the time to wake up. Whoever is working in virology, in gastroenterology, neurosciences, in biophysics, crystallography, or even biosensors and nanotechnology, to think. And people are doing and bringing up innovations and new patents and copy. All of them are coming out. So when there is a need, this is the time we should rethink. And when also a scientist needs, in terms of when to start a good research on yoga or any of the interventions, is when the sample size is more. So don't we have a good sample size right now? We have a huge number of susceptible people, presumably asymptomatic people, and COVID positive people are also growing. And mortality, even though it's a percentage of the total COVID positive patients, even that number is becoming bigger and bigger. So for a scientist to jump in with passion to find a solution, or even to find a trend, or even to find new comorbidities or diagnostics or prognostics, require that this is sample size available apart from the gloomy aspect. So when the sample size is more. A lot of times we determine our research projects by how many PhD students are interested in research. They mostly get interested by cell culture experiments, animal models, or any of the stem cell program. One of you are a stem cell biologist. But I think if we maybe, and this is why I requested that this particular program should go into Facebook, so more and more people can listen. And as presumably a lot of research scholars are listening of what goes on in a mind of a scientist or a policymaker or a president of the institute or a director of an institute or Ayush Ministry secretary or other secretaries or the prime minister of how to solve the problem. At the ground level, we need more and more PhD scholars who can think of solving a problem from their perspective. And please consider doing it in a fashion that is more cost effective, such as yoga. And yoga, as Dr. Salvamurthy mentioned, is a whole science. It just hasn't been explored enough. It can be explored with the same kind of tools that I just mentioned right in the beginning. And then is the when to start the study, when we have funds. I think the treasury is flush with funds. If the good ideas are there, the funds are available. Is there a demand? Yes, there is a demand because solutions are required. Are there incentives? Yes, there are incentives. Probably someone who's listening at the DBT secretary or DST secretary or CSIR secretary should consider having a postdoctoral fellowship, which is at the moment not existing. So those people can also be engaged in these kind of studies. Are there any educational interventions? Do we have data that most of our kids are sitting at home and they are doing online classes? Are they getting depressed? Are they facing anxiety, subclinical level? There is not enough educational research done in yoga. I must declare, even though I will come to some of the known yoga intervention studies, they have gone into, at least in our lab, into cell culture and animal, but there is hardly anything that I could know where we have seen kids being exposed to yoga protocols, the group not exposed to yoga protocol. And if you have the EEG put and the entire imaging done with other physiological and molecular parameters under consent from their parents, and what are the outputs? These kind of studies with yoga intervention or mindfulness have not been done. So that is one area where the PhDs can think of, and yoga research can contribute in a big way, because the assumption, not only the assumption, the scientific fact is that there is a direct link between the stress, anxiety, and the immune system, as I mentioned, in the form of HPA axis and the parasympathetic response. Are there policy intervention studies? Policy itself is a document. This would be very, very exciting, especially for your own faculty who are listening, if not at the student level. A good research requires a good policymaker, and a policymaker determines where to put the money, how to fund the JRFs, which projects should engage postdoctoral fellows, should we hire faculty in mass for those who will investigate yoga. So there is a department called the Center for Policy Research, and then within the DST also they have a small, they have 5 centers in the country called the Policy Research. As of now, this is probably a department who should be looking at the policy of where to fund, how much to fund, how to bring the resources, the chemicals, the grants, and that hasn't happened now, but that is, if that happens, this gives us even more promotive environment to do yoga research relevant to COVID. And then moving from why do we want to do yoga research, from when we want to do yoga research, to what to be done in a yoga research, what should we do in research of yoga? Should we just do yoga research without knowing A, B, C, D? I think the best thing is for us to learn, go read the Patanjali Sutras, the Gharend Samhitas, the Hatha Yoga Pradipikas, and probably take a course and try to understand what is Ashtanga Yoga, which very nicely encapsulates the morality aspect in the form of Yama Niyama, to Asana Pranayama into the form of breathing techniques, and then the meditative aspects, including the Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi, which leads to meditation. So meditation is actually not compartmentalized from the asanas or from the yama niyamas. They talk to each other and they influence each other. Even the asanas may influence your yama and niyamas, the yama niyamas may influence your pratyahara, and the meditation may influence your asanas, and meditation may influence the yama. So there is a lot of crosstalk, and these terminologies cannot be understood and cannot be designed as experiments unless you have known and read Ashtanga Yoga, and read it with a very cognitively neutral mind, having freedom to test whether yoga works, and even after reading that, to also test that it doesn't work. So you with hypothesis which is positively positioned, with hypothesis which is null hypothesis. So, but the requirement for training will then elicit new designs, which could be protocols like the drugs. Anti-Alzheimer drug has to be a one standardized drug given to an animal model of Alzheimer, and then if you cure it, you bring it out for patients. Similarly, yoga, it is a big challenge in standardizing it. But the International Day of Yoga has got us the common yoga protocol. So it is pretty much standardized, 45-minute of protocol. DYP's diabetic yoga protocol is there. It is for 60 minutes. So it is like a capsule or a drug, if so to say, in the language of drug discovery. So if to give this customized, whether to give this standardized protocol for diabetic risk reduction, for COVID risk reduction, or to give it for hypertension reduction through another protocol, or to customize yoga protocols for kapha prakriti, which is the Ayurvedic definition of people divided into doshas, kapha with vat, pith, and kapha. And is that the way? So these kind of head-to-head studies haven't been done. Head-to-head studies between metformin and metformin plus yoga also are very limited. So when you ask the question, what kind of yoga research has to be done, we have to think at the level of customizing it versus standardizing it, how duration, how much of the yoga, if delivered in either customized fashion or in the standardized fashion, how long should it be done, with what frequency, and will it, after the yoga is finished, is done with for 3 months or 2 months, does the effect last at the molecular level for another 6 months? Does it last physiologically for 2 months? Does it last for epigenetic level forever? So these questions have not been done. Those are the kinds of research we need to be able to tackle COVID. And when I say COVID, when I restrict myself at least to the risk reduction of COVID, diabetes or prevention of pre-diabetic to diabetic conversion, hypertension, conversion of pre-hypertensives to hypertensives, old age, the COVID protocol that I just mentioned, can it look after the depression, anxiety, and stress? The kids, the education research is completely, hardly any research on that. Should we do that? And is it the right time to do? Because a lot of ideas that I gave are also related to each other, could become different objectives of the singular same research project. And then are these COVID protocols which are there, would anybody like to validate that? So this is another research question that must be done. And now we are tele, right? You are all organizing this webinar. Similarly, yoga protocols are being given online through Zoom and through go to different WebEx and other digital modules. So is the tele intervention of the yoga protocols or the customized yoga protocols evoking a similar outcome, health outcome, as much as by the physical delivery, by face-to-face delivery of a yoga protocol? This is another research question that must be taken up. Another research question that is really the hammer on the nail is the analysis of the cost effectiveness of the yoga intervention in conversion of pre-diabetic to diabetic, pre-hypertensive to hypertensives versus the drug delivery systems. So this kind of study can be done now. The health economists should wake up and collaborate with Dr. Saha, Dr. Selvamurthy, and other people, start a core team of biologists, physiologists, clinical team, mathematical modeling, big data team, entrepreneurial team, which is investing into innovation, bring up something like electronic yoga mats to get those physiology parameters recorded, and then ask a question if the cost effectiveness is more. So this is another way of doing research where is nothing much done with regard to yoga. And then who is who and how do we do this yoga research? And you are already in the Indian system of medicine, you are probably already aware, but many of my audience are not already so much aware of how to kickstart. What do we need? So we at least need to know who are working. So let me list a few institutions apart from what you guys are doing. There is Swami Vivekananda Anushandhan Kendra back in Bangalore, Vyasa University. Then there is DRDO, who is also working on yoga protocols for the high altitude. Dr. Ames and PGI are having the, for example, the AIMS, New Delhi and Rishikesh already have a center for integrative medicine. They have, I'm told, 20 to 22 departments already soaked in different aspects of yoga intervention in different variety of diseases. And PGI itself is also working on a lot of projects ranging from high altitude, as Dr. Selvamurthy mentioned, to some of the projects in Chandigarh Police, which remain in a barrack, eat the same food, to low back pain, to projects in the prisons, the stress-induced memory loss, rescuing kind of effects of yoga intervention. Those are the kind of studies happening in PGI. Patanjali, Dr. Shirley Tellis, the director, has been working on a variety of research projects of different protocols, mainly looking at the neurophysiology outcomes. And in the Western world, the Harvard, the UCLA, we have Helen, we had yesterday Elisa Apple working on the psychological aspects and combining yoga actually with hot and cold fermentation and what are the effects on relaxation response in the body, to Helen, who is also working. Then there is Bala working at Harvard. These are the people who are already. MD Anderson has a department of integrative medicine who's doing a lot of yoga research in cancer patients using this as a palliative therapy, which is also requires a lot of new definition in our medical terminology and integrative medicine, if I may call it. Then there is Kaivalya Dham also in like in Pune, close to Lonavala, headed by P. Tiwari ji and Subodh Tiwari ji, who are also working towards a lot of research programs and educational programs, who can be a resource to collaborate. We have Vishabhasava Reddy's work on MDNY, Marajit Desai National Institute of Yoga also working in this direction. Very, very recently, Isha Foundation is beginning to show a lot of interest in the Isha Kriya and Sima Kriya. In fact, in the morning, we had a demonstration by one of their Swami, one of their devotees, to show one of the yogis to demonstrate what Isha Kriya is and how they work. So that was very interesting. So when we talk of yoga research, there is one club or baggage of research which is mentioned as asanas in Hatha Yoga Pradipika or in Patanjali Sutras, which is the codified form of yoga. And there is another form, there is another baggage which consists of innovations which have happened in a modern world. So I have no objection in people innovating, just like drugs get innovated, just like surgical tools get innovated, and our even management and administration tools also get innovated. Today we have a communication getting innovated from my coming to MET to talking through this platform is got innovated. Similarly, we should look at the innovation at this level also. We should allow the innovation in yoga to happen. So Sudarshan Kriya is one of the byproducts in that way. It is not really mentioned in a bit of Bhastrika, but aspect of it is very much innovated, not mentioned in yogic scriptures. Similarly, the Isha Kriya and Sima Kriya are all not mentioned in the yogic scriptures, but they are being, it's an innovation must, at least they deserve a comparative effectiveness trial. And schizophrenia, in bipolar disorder, in even obesity, stress reduction, immune enhancement. So that's another area on the what that I was just beginning to delve on. So I finished telling you why do we need a yoga research. I told you when do we need a yoga research. I told you what should we do in yoga research. I told you who are the prominent institutions where research is happening in the world. And now I would like to go to how to do yoga research. So what are the various parameters, or if I would say the facets of research that can prime yoga research, and what do we know about in yoga? So there are studies ranging from molecular biochemical to anthropometric, physiological tool, using genetic tools, also animal and cell culture tools now very recently, looking at before and after effect of a certain duration of yoga. What is the effect? And in the form of randomized control trials also. So one group which is either a disease group or a healthy group, another is which is given a protocol of yoga or meditation, and the other group which is waitlisted is not given protocol of yoga or meditation, and then both are followed up for a certain time, and then the analysis is done before and after in those physiological molecular parameters. And how do we choose the molecular parameter? We can look at, if we want to look at COVID risk reduction, we can easily look at IL-6, TNF alpha. Those are the ones which are known to be involved in cytokine storm that is known to ravage as it exacerbates and takes its toll. The other could be the apoptotic markers and anti-apoptotic markers, because I like cell survival, and the cell survival is the center to the immunity, the immune cells. It is centered to our survival itself, and therefore those could be chosen. You can look at the neurotrophic factors in BDNF, NGF. There are so many cytokines. You can look at MCP1, VEGF, any of the interleukins, cytokines. You can look at stem cell markers if they are if they are altered by intervention. So such studies have been done very nicely by Rima Dada in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, who's using reproductive system, and she looks at reproductive biology and looks at some of the listed molecules that I said. The same could be used in a different scenario, such as diabetes, hypertension. So these are the studies, and there are studies that have shown that. When I also mentioned our NMB program, when we did the diabetic yoga protocol, we showed not only there was a reduction in the conversion of diabetes to pre-diabetes. I mentioned, if you recall, there was more stress analyzed by or probed by PSS. The PSS is one of the neuropsychology scale, in addition to other scales such as QOL and mental well-being and stress type. And there are many other neurocognitive scales one can look at. So with focus on the PSS, we found that the PSS was high. The PSS gave us window into knowing that the pre-diabetics were having more stress than the diabetics. So we actually concluded that it is the stress which drives the conversion of pre-diabetes to diabetes. And if that is happening, the yoga intervention could at least arrest or delay the stress-based conversion of a prehypertensive into hypertension or a pre-diabetic into diabetes. And if that is happening, the underlying mechanisms and underlying molecular mechanisms which drive conversion that I just named can also be analyzed, such as HbA1c is one I mentioned, and there could be other biochemical parameters. LDL is very closely linked to the metabolism, that could be looked in. So anthropometric is waist size, and BMI is very easy to look, and one can look at that. So we showed all these markers, all these anthropometric to molecular markers, in particular the VEGF and angiogenin level after diabetic yoga protocol. In another study that we did locally in Panchkula and Chandigarh as a part of Navneet, one of our PhD student thesis, showed there was a marked upregulation of VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, which assists in new blood vessel formation, and which also works hand in hand with neurogenesis, or the new neuronal regeneration in the brain. Dr. Saha is probably from the biology, stem cell biology. So there is that component which gets kicked up. So the VEGF and the BDNF, the brain-derived growth factor, also gets upregulated in these patients who were not really patients, but they were healthy volunteers, but pre-diabetic, screened from the community, and there was an increased serum level when analyzed by ELISA. So, and then when we correlated the stress level, as I mentioned, the PSS level, also PSS scoring showed that there was a reduction in the stress when this diabetic yoga protocol was given. So there is that data already with us that shows that this could be of value to the COVID. Very recently, we proposed, after a great session we had with Sadhguru on the Isha and Sima Kriya, we put that application together in the 3 groups of patients, and this got funded recently. We're just waiting for the ethical approval before we operationalize the grant. And we are looking at the 3 group of people. One, the COVID positive patients, the HCWs, the healthcare workers who are exposed to these COVID positive patients, and the 3rd group who are convalescent patients. So these 3 groups will be given Isha Kriya and the Sima Kriya for 14 days at an intervention, also at sampling at 7 days. And we will be looking all the lung parameters, the PO2 level, the LDL level, and other parameters that are associated with the COVID progression. Now here it becomes even more pertinent for me to bring up, as Dr. Selvamurthy opened his camera, to highlight, to mark the work that we did in Ladakh and Mansarovar in collaboration with Art of Living. And we took the people actually already taken by the Art of Living flights, and they pretty much led the entire program for a 4-day advanced level 2 course. And they put you in Mahabodhi. In Leh, there is a retreat center. And of course, when they go to the Mansarovar, they have their own program. But we just gave them this idea, and they sampled before and after 4 days of retreat in such a height of about 12,000 feet and 16,000 feet, respectively. And two things that came out, of course, the data is big and just one part of it is already now just came out in brain and behavior. But the important thing that I want to label here is that we found the PO2 levels went up. And PO2 levels are again very important for COVID, because if you were to decide if you were to take your elderly people in homes to the hospital or not, a doctor will say just buy a pulse oximeter at home and just look at the PO2 levels. So if they are really falling below 93 or into 80s, they should shift to a ICU or to the hospital. So it's a very good barometer or a kind of a parameter to assess the breathing state and the ventilatory support you have when you are, in this case, when you are not acclimatized and suddenly jumped, flew into Ladakh or flew into Mansarovar. So the PO2 level is, as compared to those who did not get a Sudarshan Kriya intervention, went up considerably. But even more important is the fact when we segregated this data into Kapha, Vata, and Pitta. So we found that the alteration in both the biochemical parameters and the neuropsychological parameters was differential when we compared the Kapha, Vata, and Pitta. There cannot be a better evidence that how important it is for us to integrate and to position the Ayurveda acharyas and the yoga acharyas into where the patient's flow is maximum, such as PGI, All India Institute, where the patients are being seen in big numbers. As I mentioned, what to do in research. When I said why to do research, I mentioned sample number. So this sample number is higher in these institutes, and only if we have criteria and a means to probe these patients by Kapha, Pitta, or the doshas, we will be able to get this discriminatory data, which could even be so much applicable to our armed forces. We are having a standoff, we are told, in Leh, and we may have to mobilize the forces suddenly. And what do we give them? Just that drug, which is some diuretic drug, which may or may not work. At least we showed now in the form of a published work that Sudarshan Kriya intervention can actually rescue with intermittent hypoxia, and can do so in a dosha specific manner. In our case, it was best for the Vata Prakriti, Pitta Prakriti, sorry, which showed not only better neuropsychological and neurocognitive outcome, but also the PO2 elevation. So this rescued these people, and they were hale and hearty and happy. So this is of extreme importance to our current climate of COVID, fear, scare, stress, and apparently an immune compromised state. Until we fight our internal self nicely, how can we fight the external invasion of these viruses? And given the fact that some of these kriyas and yoga asanas work in improving our PO2 levels, and if they do so in a Prakriti-based fashion, even more for us to get more and more digital access to these people who can customize Kapha's specific protocol, Vata specific protocol, and those experts are already there. And how do we believe those experts? Because now, as we know from Dr. Selvam-Murthy's mention of the accredited yoga practitioners, we have certified people level 1, level 2, level 3. I am level 1, for example. So there are level 2 and level 3 who can actually, who are trained to do it. They not only know good theory, they know very good practical, and they are even tested at the delivery level, at the teaching level. All 3 parameters are judged, and it is a QCI program, so it is all full of quality. So we can engage those people to deliver this, but provided we have this data and we are more researchers working towards comparing one type of protocol to the other, before and after, in randomized control fashion, as I mentioned, or crisscross randomized fashion, so that our data is robust, it is reproducible, and it is full of quality tools. And now I bring in the issue of this tool called the quality assurance tool, which is also called in our research terminology as the GLP, good lab practices. It is known by GCP by the clinical colleagues, good clinical practice. It is known by businessmen as GMP, good manufacturing practices. The GMP is always highlighted because everybody has to do a brush, so Colgate has to go through a GMP. We have to eat some frozen foods, so they go through a food environment which is presumably a GMP certified thing. A GCP, a drug we take, has to go through GCP. But what about GLP? What about yoga GLP? Because it is at the really nidus, at the stage of the bench. It will become a translation one day. But if we bring in the quality right at the time where MET could take lead, our lab is completely GLP compliant. We maintain a paper profile of standard operating procedures, SOPs, data recording sheets, calibration of instruments, inventory control, even sample inventory, and independent validation sheets. And we bring in these systems to make our data verifiable, back traceable, auditable. And if we can bring this to yoga research, it can be more and more meaningful for COVID implementation and operationalization and translation. And that is when the GMP people, people who are doing business, and people who are into technology, because I read somewhere Dr. Selvamoorthy is in charge of innovation, if I'm correct. So he's probably has the responsibility to bring the thoughts from the bench to the mass level. And the only way to scale it up is through entrepreneurial fashion. That requires an incubator, that requires quality. And these people of the entrepreneurial incubator heritage will require the GLP tools to be ingrained in our yoga research. So this is what we practice, we maintain in yoga, because when you talk of yoga, there is also that pro and anti-yoga. I would call them cognitively biased people, because otherwise they would come up with research projects showing that the Sudarshan Kriya does not work. Go ahead and go and launch these projects in the high altitude areas, engage your resources and show us that it is not. It will benefit us to improvise more, but that is not happening. So even though it is not happening, and even though there are people who would like to oppose, even more important for us to ingrain and integrate our yoga quality tools into yoga research. So that is my very, very important message. And last but not the least, I will now try to tell you that how important it is also for us to know that no matter what kind of yoga research we do, or whatever good data of stress reduction and COVID risk reduction we have, PO2 elevation we have better physiological molecular readouts. People are now in our lab, we are getting yoga derived blood serum to grow cultures and see if the culture life and the cells in them are surviving longer. And we are creating animal models and giving stem cells from the yoga practitioner to see if they can rescue injuries. Despite doing all this research, if we do not know what is the acceptability of yoga, we will still not be able to, because we know if there is a disease and death in the world, people will still buy a pill, but will they buy the yoga module? So we did when we were doing the NMB program led by the SVS, Guruji, Dr. Nagendra and Dr. R. Nagaratna. They were smart, and they were very smart because in the same time, they planned to do this exercise to know how many are practicing yoga in the country. And this was already done in Australia, US, and Europe. And our figures, not so happily, I have to state, and these are now published in Medicines and one journal, I think, General Hospital Psychiatry, which tells that about 10 to 11% of people in India practice yoga. This was a cross-sectional one-time study, and this matches with the US. I mean, we should have been doing better. But in any case, this digital tool and this Facebook Live session will probably contribute in that fashion. And more research and more data full of quality will also contribute in that fashion. But another thing we asked in that same questionnaire, apart from how many do yoga, was to how many of you believe yoga helps in lifestyle improvement? How many of you believe diabetes will be managed, or other diabetic, other diseases of the NCDs kind, such as cardiovascular risk, heart failures, or hypertension, migraine can be addressed by yoga, and about 90% of them said that this. So there is an acceptability. Then we did another study, again, that's also out now, of the barriers and benefits of yoga, and we tried to find out what are the barriers. Are there any barriers in people doing yoga? So they said, yes, there are barriers, and a lot of them, actually, a significant proportion of them said that they feel lazy, that there is not family support, the office hours do not allow us. And then a lot of them said that there are not enough yoga practitioners whom we can trust. Here is a plan, level 1, 2, 3. Here is your pedestal, your committee can take lead and take it forward. So that was one of the barriers. And the benefits, of course, they felt it can calm your mind. They felt that it is good for physical upbeat, your physical wellness, and it's good for health. They believed it can prevent a lot of disease, so it's an effective tool for preventive medicine. So with this study, I am presenting to you now, which is already in the public domain, and it's an open access journal. These figures can be seen, these are national figures. We have those figures with us. So let us get down to real research, full of quality tools, ingrained and encompassing the ethical tools with the informed consents of people through regulatory approvals and CTRI registrations. Let us do bigger sample size randomized control trials, either before and after. or even N-on-1 trials on person to person. We have a case report, integrative medicine case reports in our institute being published. We even publish one single case report for people who are just doing yoga studios, do not have access to ethical communities. But at least let us do it in this fashion, because now we have a why, and now we know how. Now we know what is to be done, and now we also know who's doing yoga, and we can even go further into integrating not only with the modern medicine that we have, we can integrate between our Ayush and Indian system also. As I was mentioning yesterday's talk, we had Dr. Elisa Ippel talking about hot and cold fermentation combined with the pranayama exercise and what were the outcomes in a retreat center for 7 days. And they showed by microarray a certain anti-inflammatory genes went up by a certain fold. And when I say fold, she said, when I asked her yesterday, you can go yoga scholars PG Amir and look at that talk. She said tenfold, more than tenfold increase, not just random, because up and down can happen in any of the micro experiments, even though they are controlled. But this was many, many fold. So combining yoga with Siddha medication and delivering and seeing these kind of experiments, whether it is singular N-on-1 trial or in randomized trials, combining it with acupressure, combining it with Ayurveda. I just gave a very good example of dosha-wise outcomes in our high altitude study. It got published in Pain and Behavior. So this combination, when it happens, this will also pave way for us to patent some of the processes. If we cannot patent some of the practices, it is a little challenging. We just applied, my group just applied for a patent to come up with an augmented reality. I'm telling it right away, I have no inhibition. When it comes to yoga, the good thing is you don't keep your best of designs and ideas close to your chest, unlike our traditional scientists in other parts of the world who are in non-yoga field. I think yoga is also about union of mind-body. It is also about merging with the superconscious. And I have no qualms whatsoever in sharing that this patent application discloses a means to come up with an app which will, actually it was done before lockdown, an augmented reality where you will stand in front of it and deliver a certain customized yoga protocols, and it will adjust to how nicely they do it and how they do not do it. So it's becoming a patent application. So it will become a patent application if we mix our ideas, our Indian system therapies that are there with yoga and with protocols, whether customized or standardized. And then I'm sure more and more patent applications will come in. I'm again emphasizing the value of patents, because it is with patenting, it is with commercialization, it is with entrepreneurial feelings, we will be able to take it to that scale. We will have that mass scale effect, translational effect, and an effect which will sit and go inside the clinics of our physicians, which will make their pen write a prescription for a diabetic walking into his clinic, take metformin, take DYP for 6 days in a week for 3 months. This cannot happen unless we take our yoga knowledge from bench to society and further on to the global stage, unless we are able to bring in the technology, able to bring in the entrepreneurial spirit into it. So I think
thank you, Dr. Akshay. I think there'll be a number of questions people might like to interact with you. So I think at this stage we will open it to the people who are observing and also listening to this conversation. And it's very difficult to have 1 hour lecture without slides. That itself is something I have to compliment. The flow of knowledge. You are an encyclopedia of the research on yoga, the traditional systems of medicine. We can see the breadth, depth of your knowledge, understanding, and also contributions. Not just knowledge but your contributions are immense in these fields, and which we all appreciate. We are very proud to have people like you in this yogic research area domain, propagating this message, placing it on the scientific pedestal. So particularly your work on this SVASA yoga protocol, which is published in British Medical Journal, is commendable. And you have been a very important part of that study. Similarly, in formulating the common yoga protocol and also the certification, which for yourself you have done, and a lot number of areas you have contributed. So we deeply appreciate, congratulate you, and also compliment you and wish you many, many more successes in your research endeavors. Now, the one question has come from Sydney, Dr. Gaurav Sharma from Sydney. He has asked about the stress. How does the stress, yoga, ameliorates the stress induced responses, and how yoga can be used for stress management, and what is the scientific rationale of this? So over to you,
Yeah,
Rakshay.
thank you for that question. Gautam. Uh, Stress is so inherent in our lives that sometimes we cannot even assess it. And the psychologists have developed these nice tools such as um, mental well-being and PSS, and even everything is encapsulated in QOL also. Dr. Elisa wants to call it granular effects. Even though you do, even if you do yoga and pranayama and sit out, you have a group doing yoga and they come out, they will all appear to be, as happy as another group which has done exercise or has not done anything but were there for a satsang or some religious exercise. But how to then actually find out that it is happening? So we use these neuropsychology tools, and those are the tools which give us an insight into how well, how much the stress scoring done by these neuropsychological tools has reduced after yoga. That is number one observation. And how much of that reduction of the stress is bringing up changes in the biochemical level. So people have done cortisol related studies. So they have looked at cortisol before and after yoga, or with yoga and without yoga. And they've found that cortisol, which actually drives the what is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the gonadal HPG axis, which is the main line between the CNS and the immune system, is governed by cortisol level, and elevated cortisol can actually do more harm to even an invisible stress, as I mentioned, which is not visible when you do yoga, and people come out in the form of an intervention as compared to those who are not. So, in addition to granularity of the or the detailed administration of the stress questionnaire and the anxiety questionnaire, even the biochemical levels, as I mentioned, are shown to be changing. People have looked at serotonin levels, dopamine levels, and those have been shown to drive these stress responses. And this is even reflected in what I did not tell you what happened in our Mansarovar high altitude study led by Art of Living, was we even looked at the HRV, what is called the heart rate variability changes. And this is another good marker because you would agree with me, Gautam, that if your heart is beating very fast, either you are about to give a talk, if you are a person who gives talks, or if you are about to face an exam, or if you are really stressed out because you have a fight and flight response, which is important because you need to flood in your VEGF and all these neurotransmitters to either fight or be frightened. So both are defense responses, and they are also there is an cortisol element to it, and these responses are very nicely captured by heart rate variability. So these changes we also remarkably were seen significantly changed in with and without Sudarshan Kriya, who were actually exposed to hypoxic kind of an environment at 16,000 feet. And this has also been shown in other heart-related disorders. So at these three level, I can immediately think of as a scientific basis of pranayama. But one more, if there are, I'm tempted to give you a more easy way to explain this because a lot of audience is also non-scientific. If you will agree with me, Gautam, that when we are sleeping, we have a different kind of a breath regulation, and we are angry, we have a different dynamics of breath. And when we are sad, it's altogether a different character. And when we are happy, it's absolutely different. And when you ask me a very difficult question, my breath will be also a little different. So if the breath is a regulator, or if breath is a good probe into the mind, I would say we have a fairly good commonsensical reason to believe that it might be a good bridge between mind and body, and which is actually true. So by the breathing exercises, if you do just belly breathing for a minute and just bhastrika for just a minute, and maybe just alom vilom or nadi shodhan for some time. It will bring down your breath. The deep breathing will actually bring down your heart rate, your stress responses. And if you were to do a biochemical estimation of cortisol, I would not be surprised if not at the protein level by ELISA. I think even at the RNA PCR level, I think gene expression changes will be more swifter, more faster than the protein, because the RNA transcription, the central dogma. If you do not know, I'll tell you the gene describe expresses itself by an RNA, and RNA then becomes a protein. So the translation from RNA to translation takes some time. So protein will take time for its targeting and expression, but the gene expression changes will be faster.
Thank you. See, also stress management is in three steps. Normalize your perception, optimize your reaction, and release the stress as quickly as possible.
True.
Yoga does help you in all these ways. It normalizes your perception towards stress. If you don't perceive any situation, any incidents, any stimulus as stressful, then your response will be appropriate. Similarly, it optimizes your reaction by building the parasympathetic tone, the cooling system of your body, and it optimizes your reaction so you don't show an exaggerated arousal, sympathetic or sympathoadrenal arousal. So then the other one is it releases the stress quickly because of the increased parasympathetic tone. It doesn't allow you to exaggerate response, and it restores the equilibrium back to normal, which was disturbed by stress. So
Thank you.
that's the way it works. And so that is Dr. Gaurav Sharma and Sri S.K. Suraj Kuryal. He is asking which yoga kriyas are useful for corona type of episode, which type of kriyas in yoga will be able to help in COVID-19 situations. Over to you.
Thank you for that question. If you heard me out for the last 1 hour, I started with a very conservative note of risk reduction for COVID, and I focused and didn't go beyond, except mentioning Isha Kriya, to which I will come to. I restricted myself to the use of diabetic yoga protocol in reducing the risk for diabetes, because these are the people reported to have some association with COVID. And I also mentioned about the hypertension, and there is that entire angiotensin system which is affected by yogic kriyas and pranayam in as an analogous to what Dr. Selvamurthy just mentioned. So I told about that. So that is an indirect cue into managing COVID by risk reduction. And the other one I also mentioned about the stress aspects also. Pranayama can regulate our relaxation response, and therefore the internal conflicts, if I may put it in more lucid terms, can get resolved before the immunity takes over on a viral attack or a low viral dose or a high viral dose. Now, apart from that, we are now investigating the effect of what Sadhguru believes as prescribed Isha Kriya and Sima Kriya. Basically, a combination of, and you can come to our website. We have this demonstration tomorrow, 7:20 a.m. at Yoga Scholars PGIMER, and they prescribe. Now we haven't tested this, but Sadhguru feels that if you're not able to do this 21 times, you're already sure that you have some breath holding capacity problem, and that you should show a doctor. So it's not only a prescription curative, but it's also diagnostic according to him. So you can look it up, Isha Kriya and Sima Kriya. Basically, I will very briefly tell you. One of them is an Omkara chanting. So you stand erect and with your head rolled back a little bit, and you chant. This is what I learned today. And you chant Akara. And you chant it assuming that this voice is coming from just below the navel region, and do it 12 times, he says, for those with comorbidity, and otherwise 21 times. So this is one. And second is when you breathe in and breathe out. When you breathe in, you say, I'm not the mind. And when you breathe out, you say, I'm not the body. And they prescribe it is to be said there is a guided voice. And I'm mentioning this because the adapted fashion or a modified version of this is what we're going to test now, which has just got funded. And the third is the Simakriya, if I'm not confusing, before I go to the real COVID protocol, which is come out by the SVR sites on their website. So the last one, if I'm not wrong, as I mentioned, it is the Simakriya, in which you roll your tongue in Shamvi Mudra like this, and then you put your hands on your knees, and you bring your diaphragm up, and with your eyes closed and head. I don't remember if the head is to be rolled back, but let us not roll it now. And with that, you breathe out and breathe in. I'm sorry, this was not this because I'm a new learner into this, but since I was asked, so I went ahead and do it. It is, in fact, a lion's breath. So you do in this, you're in the same posture, erect, with your hands on your, pressing your knees and the diaphragm raised, and you pull out your tongue and you breathe in the lion's fashion 21 times like that 21 times. So he feels that, and they say that if you cannot do it, there may be a problem already, that you shouldn't do it and show a doctor. And then the next part of that is then the tongue rolled and then you breathe in with your. But the details will be available tomorrow. Now, SVyasa, if you go to their website, SVyasa, SVYASA, I will also type it here. They have three protocols, if you remember, I mentioned to you. And those are, I just typed it for you. You can look up their website front page. They show these three protocols, COVID protocol, and there is a review already come out in iJoy. They believe that this increases the lung capacity, and this is useful in improving lung system, and more alveoli down back in the anterior part of the lungs are engaged in breathing. And that is, I think, a 15 to 20-minute protocol. We did a PGI community medicine led program for SARC countries after our Honorable Prime Minister had a teleconference with SARC. As a follow-up, the Ministry of External Affairs invited us in the community medicine led by Sonu Goyal, and I did this. I gave them this SVyasa protocol. And finally, we also had a very good, if I'm not taking too much of your time, Dr. Salvamurthy, there was this talk we had from Dr. Neeraj Patil from UK, who himself suffered from COVID. And then one Dr. Arun Brownstein from he lives in Hawaii and is a Kaivalya Dham follower of yoga system. Both of them said what they are doing to the patient they see in ICU. Having COVID, they make them lie in the prone position and make them breathe in a certain fashion. So that's one more thing you can look up by going to our website, Yoga Scholars PGMI Facebook page, or just these are my four hints, but I think more research data needs to be produced. And
Thank you, sir. I think we need to go for conclusion. Before going, I will request Salvamurthy sir that we can take few comment, one comment from Sachin Badoni ji and one comment from SK Sinha ji.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, Sinha ji, yeah.
There is one question from Mr. Vedant Prajapati. Yoga for acidity reduction. So how can yoga help in the management of hyperacidity and particularly to reduce the acidity? Can yoga practice be used, and if so, what is the mechanism?
Very interesting. I do not have a very promising answer for this because I haven't been able to come across any particular study in the form of meditation, asana, pranayama. But I myself get a hint because when I myself described the Ashtanga Yoga, I brought in the Yama Niyamas, the asana, pranayama, pratyahara aspects, the internal part, and of course, even more the inner engineering part, the meditation aspects. I think yoga deals with it in a more holistic fashion. If our body is in harmony with our mind, a lot of these, at least the acidity due to psychosomatic aspects, should be taken care of. And then if we can even bring in the yogic diet aspect to it, maybe that can help. And therefore, there is probably an area where Ayurveda can come in, and in addition to some yogic kriyas, to which I do not have a protocol to prescribe.
Certainly, the stress
Thank
is
you.
one of the precursors for the acidity, and once you are able to manage stress, acidity will also come down. And now there is a question from Mr. Asutosh Sharma. Uh, he has appreciated your presentation, and also he has asked can a researcher design an experiment for studying yoga and its effects on neurological disorders? Yoga research should be done on molecular level or physiological level. So he is asking that how do you design for studying the effects of yoga and
This,
neurological disorders.
this is the,
Yeah, a cross comment before I answer.
I think this is a question which require a lot of explanation or comprehensive design.
But I
So
can,
as we are already over time, so our IT team is instructing that they have another session lineup. So it will be great that we can always communicate with you, and Sulamurthy sir is
I
always
hope that
guiding
Dr.
us.
Ashutosh
So
Sharma
we can
is
post
not.
the questions to you and we get the answer as well. I myself having a lot of questions because working at Naiper and connecting with PGI. So I was having a lot of comments, even our co-panelists were having a lot of comments and questions because you have inspired a lot many people. So I am just reading the comments. They are just following you and they are saying that I will take the guidance from you and go do the research in yoga and meditation.
Maybe the
Now,
last question you can take from
I will,
Ashutosh.
I will do it in 30 seconds. The
Yeah,
second reason is
30 seconds.
30
Time
seconds.
starts now.
And I'm also inspired because I'm suspecting this is Ashutosh Sharma, the DST secretary. So, yes, the neurological disorders can be definitely looked at by number one, psychological analysis, question based before and after study, bring in the Ayurvedic principles of doshas and see which the effects are maximum. And the cell culture animal model, very easily done. We have a stroke mouse model and a memory loss mouse model. Amyloid beta we put intrahippocampi and we deplete the memories. Now we are already planning to do pregnancy-induced yoga blood taken out from the peripheral blood. We take out the stem cells of the yoga practitioner, put them in this animal model, and see if the mouse can find it's in the water maze, the platform, faster than the ones that have not been given these stem cells, or the stem cells given from the peripheral blood of non-yoga practitioners. This is definitely possible. We are also growing the NSC, the mouse cell lines, the motor neuron cell lines. It's called the NSC34 cell lines, the motor neuron cell lines. We are already planning to put some of the yoga practitioners' blood products, could be any of the kinds of stem cells or cytokines or any of just the sera, and see if we can replace the FBS in the sera, how much we can affect the cell survival path. So it's very much possible. No one has done that till date. In the 5,500 publications, if you put yoga in PubMed, there is none that has done. I think we're going to do it.
Thank you so much, Akshay, and thank you, Professor Dr. Akshay Anand, for these wonderful deliberations. And you did a great job, and I'm so proud that I was able to interact with you even earlier in your younger days. And wish you all the best to continue this mission of yoga research, because we have a big responsibility of placing yoga on a scientific pedestal through controlled experiments, looking from man to molecule to understand the basic mechanism, how yoga works. So all these are very, very vital questions which will be answered, which are being answered not only from within researchers from within the country, but across the globe. And also Government of India, Ministry of Ayush has taken a very important step of standardizing yoga. You know, the controlling the quality of yoga education, training, research, as well as the therapy. That so that the proper emphasis is made on quality. Otherwise, everybody starts yoga just learning after a webinar, and they become a yoga practitioner and yoga teacher. So the certification, yoga certification board has come in, and then this is doing a good job. And please certify, accredit yourself. Like NAC accreditation, there is also accreditation of yoga practitioners, trainers, teachers, and also therapists to this. And I am fortunately, I am the chairman of that assessment committee, yoga assessment committee.
Wow.
And there is another higher level technical committee chaired by Sri Ravi Shankar ji. And there is another committee chaired by Dr. Baba Ramdev ji, steering committee. So there are three levels in yoga certification board. So I am fortunate to be the chairman of the assessment committee. Please enroll yourself, register, accredit yourself to this board, and we will certify you after due process. As Akshay said, he is level 1, so you can go from level 1, 2, 3, and higher levels. And we are also asking various institutions to also get accredited to this, who are doing research, propagation, promotion in yoga research and education. So with this, thank you very much. Now I hand over to the Rajput and Swati to conclude, And all the best, Akshay, to continue the mission of yoga. Our blessings are with you.
Thank you very much for the very encouraging
Thank you.
words.
Thank you everyone for participating. We will be stay connected, and yoga is the meaning of having the connection. So we'll build up the connection, do the research. So definitely many will follow, and I'm personally following you a lot. Thank you everyone for
Thank you,
participating.
sir.
Thank you, Sulamurthy sir.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Professor
sir.
Akshay,
Thank
for
you,
this
sir.
wonderful
Thank you,
talk.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.